everybody. Welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I have a football hero. I'm going to call him that. We can do that. We can make up things. I love it. It's not really made up because he is. Brian is here with us. We're going to be talking about his podcast journey. We're going to toss the ball back and forth together here on the podcast. I'm going to hopefully not hurt myself in the process, and Brian's not going to tackle me. So we're all good all around. It's going to be a fun conversation. Brian, welcome to the How to Podcast series.
Thanks for having me, Dave. I think hero might be a little bit of a stretch.
Well, you told me to say that. I wrote it down. You said, make sure you say I'm a football hero. It's right there on my paper.
Okay.
All right.
No, I definitely, it's a part of my, it's a part of my story that I have just recently started to kind of reckon with. And there's a lot to that, that whole piece of my life. But it's been an interesting journey of leaving that world and not really knowing how to utilize it and how to keep those connections. Yeah. And then just recently, as I've gone back, and I actually was back 2 weeks ago for an alumni event, and it was really cool to go back and kind of be welcomed back with open arms, and for that whole part of my life to kind of be revitalized and brought back a little bit. So that's a completely different story for a different day, but it's a fun part of my life that I like to look back on. And it's also fun and during this time of the year, because I mean, my boys are playing well right now. So it's fun to watch them. And I've always loved that. And football's always been a big part of my life. So hopefully it will continue to be. We'll see if it's something my son's interested in.
There you go.
I don't know. We'll see.
Good stuff. How long were you playing for? Your jersey's up behind you, nicely framed, but how long were you playing for?
So I played at the University of Oregon for 5 years. I redshirted, and I was a walk-on there, and I spent my 5 years there. I lettered a couple of years and didn't have the most illustrious career, but was a part of some amazing teams nonetheless. So yeah, it was. In the time that I was there, we won a lot of games. We had opportunities to compete in the Rose Bowl, a national championship game that we lost to Auburn. So definitely was there at an amazing time and have some amazing life experience from those 5 years for sure.
I had a player on. I'm in Canada. He played for the CFL, and he talked about the perspective of a player on a team, in the sense that, yes, you're a team and you want to succeed as a team, but you also have to succeed on your own to earn your spot and to keep your spot.
Absolutely.
So you're kind of competing with each other, but you're also competing with each other.
Yeah.
Right. It's like you're together, but you're on your own, and you're fighting for your spot on the line, and all of that, but at the same time being in a supportive environment. And what I kind of do, here we go, segue, is it's kind of like podcasting, in the sense that you are working together with others.
Yeah.
We're working together right now. But at the same time, you're also trying to be better yourself. You want to grow, and you want to be a better podcaster. You're on a journey.
For sure. Right?
So it's a balance between competition and support back and forth.
Yeah. And I think that the teams that do it well, and I think probably ultimately, as I get into this, the podcasters that do it well, you're able to kind of find your role in that and contribute to the team in whatever way you can. And sometimes that means, for me, I played a background role. I was the scout team guy for a lot of my career. And so it was like, I could have gone two directions. I could have just said, well, I don't want to do this because I'm not in the limelight, or I have a role, and what I do during the week is contributing to what happens on a Saturday. So yeah, in the same sense of like, there's multiple people involved in this podcasting thing. And if you play your role and you do it well and you contribute to the team in that sense, then the team overall is more successful. So definitely it's an interesting world to live in. But I've brought a lot of the things that I've learned and the pieces of who I was as an athlete into my life. Into my teaching career, into now nonprofit, into my parenting, being a husband, it all pours over into life for sure.
And then you add in on top of that, the spectators in the stands who are barking out at you what you're doing wrong. They're cheering you when you do something right, but they have a totally different perspective because they're not on the field. And what I kind of equated is a stands full of people who desperately need exercise, yelling at people on the field that desperately need a break. That's kind of how I look at it. You guys should all come down from the stands and try getting hit by somebody who's 300 pounds and see what that feels like, right?
I look at it now and look at some of the things these guys do, diving for balls and things like that, and just the tumbles they take. And I'm like, how did my body,
right.
How did I do that? Because if I was to go in the backyard right now and dive for a football, like I wouldn't get up.
No,
I'd be down for a few minutes.
Man down.
Yeah,
Right?
I don't, it's weird. But no, that was definitely a part of my life where I could do that and just stand right back up and keep on going. But I look at it now and I'm like, no, thanks. I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. And then let's go back to podcasting again. Same thing. We have listeners who listen to the show. They have no idea how this works. They have no idea how you become a podcaster, what goes on behind the scenes, how much work it takes to do this, to create a show. And they're just spectating going, this looks easy. And you're like, no, it's not. It's actually a lot of work to do all this podcasting stuff. There's a lot of stuff you got to learn.
I'm in the middle of finding that out right now with trying to get at the table started and working through that process. And I was like, well, yeah, you just like sit down and you put a camera up and you talk about stuff and then you post it. And it's like, no, there's definitely some other steps involved, and there's some more planning and more thought process that goes into it. So, and again, it takes a team. It doesn't, if you go in with the perspective of like, oh, I'm doing this all by myself and I know exactly how it's going to work.
Yeah.
I'm lucky to have my wife is involved in it. And I've got a buddy that's working with us on it, and he's come to me with multiple ideas and, hey, I think this would work really well. And so the brainstorming and the working together to get things going and to set it up the way that we think is going to work well and that it's going to resonate with people. Because ultimately, one of the things that we talked about was we don't want people to leave at the table and feel like all they did was come in and sit down and get interviewed. We want them to walk away having an experience and feel like they're a part of a community and that they grew from that experience.
Excellent. Let's talk about your podcast, the name of your show, where we find it, do all this stuff. Let's talk about that at the beginning.
Yeah. So At the Table, it is yet to be launched. It's coming soon. We're working on getting a couple more episodes so that we can start put it out there, but it will be, the goal is to have it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and wherever else whatever other places we can get it. So I can update you on that when we get it there.
Good.
As well as we are recording video. So we'll have a YouTube channel for it. Right now, it's, like I said, it's still in the works. We're still kind of in the building phase. We have recorded a pilot episode. We're in the editing phase there. And the idea behind it is we're bringing people in to literally sit at my wife and I's dining room table and talk about life and marriage and relationships and family and parenting, and just give them a space to tell their story about how they grew their relationship, what happened, and how they kind of became a couple, or how things fell apart, or whatever their story is, how they became parents, what that looks like for them, and just to create an open space. Because one of the things that we found with our story was we felt very alone in some of the things that have happened to us. And we've experienced pregnancy loss and different things along the way. And there was always this sense of like, we're going through this alone. Nobody else has ever been through it. So, which isn't true. And we found that throughout the time, it's like, there's always somebody that's been through it, or there's always somebody out there that can help. But we just didn't feel like that there was space for that. And the resources for that. So trying to create a space and create a resource for people that go through whatever their story may be. So it's very open. It's very like, let's sit down and have a conversation. And like I said, we sit at the dining room table and we have a little bit of a format and a flow that we want to kind of progress through. And we're trying to figure out and learn as hosts of how we do that. But honestly, let's sit down, let's have coffee, and let's just talk about how we got to the point that we're at now in our life.
Excellent.
What is our story building up to that point?
So
how it's formed, the way we're going to move forward.
Any thoughts, concerns, questions as you get close to launching the podcast? Anything that you're kind of struggling with, or you might have a question about that maybe we can talk about?
Yeah, I think so. For me, the big thing is I don't necessarily consider myself a perfectionist, but I do like things to be done well. If I'm going to put my name on them and I'm going to put them out there, right? I think that's not like an uncommon trait. But so for me, there's been a lot of hesitation of like, do we just go ahead and when we have opportunities to film, because we both, like, I run our nonprofit full time, my wife works full time, and the guy that's producing everything for us, Jackson, he has a job and is doing other things and has other jobs that he's working on. So it's like we have less time right now to podcast than we would like to, and to actually sit down and do these recordings. And it also requires people saying, yes, I want to open up and I want to tell my story.
Yeah.
So we're trying to build a schedule and kind of put people on a schedule so that we can have some consistency. But that was one of our fears going in, is like, if we don't have a consistent platform, is it going to hurt us in the long run? Or can we start and launch and be a little inconsistent to begin, to try to kind of build some momentum, and then as we build momentum, become more consistent? So that's kind of the space in what we're at, is like kind of jumbling. Okay, let's wait a little bit longer, or do we just throw this out there and maybe that is the catalyst to give us some more consistency?
Yeah. I have an author podcast, and I had an author on, and they said, you can't edit a blank piece of paper. You have to put words on the paper before you can even edit. So if you ever want to write anything, you just have to write. It's going to be messy. It's not going to be perfect as much as you want it to be, but you can't grow past what you don't do. So that's kind of a thing. And the beauty of podcasting is you can release something. It might not be exactly to your dream standard of what you want and what you envision for your show, but you've started. You can always go back and tweak it later. You can update it in the from the past. You can go back and fix anything.
Okay.
But again, you don't really have anything to leverage and to compare to say that my next episode is going to be better than my last episode, because you don't have a last episode.
Correct.
So you'll never get better. So I know, like for me, my author podcast, when I first started, it was all based around interviews of authors. And my first couple episodes, I don't have any guests.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a podcast. I've never had a podcast about this. And who's going to come on my show with 0 listens? Nobody. Like, who are you? I don't know who you are. Are you even good? Like, what is this podcast about? So my first couple episodes, I just did book reviews of books that I loved.
Okay.
And started the process of talking about this book and say, I really like this book because this and this and this. Here's a link to the book. Would love if you support this author. I never asked the author for permission to talk about their book. I never contacted the author. I was too nervous, but I just got out there and I reviewed a couple books. And then from there, somebody's like, then I could say to somebody, would you like to come on my show? And they're like, well, I'm new, but I do have 2 episodes and here's my goal. So now I have a focus because I've done it. And then if I want to, I could always go back and delete those or whatever I want to do. But that was my starting point, was I don't have any authors, and I'll never have an author if I don't start. So I'll just start with a book review.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I got going.
Interesting. Yeah, because I don't know. That was my whole thing, is like, well, maybe we need to have a few episodes done before we post so that we have some consistency within the first few episodes. But there's also the idea of, well, maybe we put the pilot out there and then that gives us a way to say, hey, we're doing this. If you want to be involved, reach out and let us know. Yeah. Here's an example of what we're doing. Go listen to our story. And if this is something that you'd be interested in, then let us know and let's get you on the schedule and you can tell your story.
Yeah. It's like a store. When like a new little shop opens up downtown and it's brand new, never heard of it before, and they have what they call a soft opening.
Yeah.
Where it's not really open. Like, we're going to open next week, but we're open right now because all of us are new. Nobody knows how to run the cash register. The phone's ringing because nobody knows who answers the phone. We don't know how to turn the music on in the store yet. We don't know where the button is. Like, nothing's working, but it's open. And if you don't mind it, we're just learning. It's going to take you half an hour for the person to check you out on the cash. We don't know what we're doing, but here it is. Come in and take a taste. You can do that in your podcast and have a soft launch of your podcast, and just don't tell anybody. Just put it out there, let the episode go live, and just don't say anything. And if somebody finds it, that's great news, first of all, because you did 0 promotion. and
Yeah.
someone found your show.
Yeah.
Celebrate that, because that's exactly what everybody wants, is people to find their show.
Yeah.
So if that happens, that's great. If nobody listens, it's fine. But you get to listen to it. You get to share it with your close circle of friends and maybe another podcaster who would love to
Yeah.
give you some insight. And then once you feel comfortable, everything's in motion, because you have that one episode out. You can now hook up to Apple and Spotify, all the players. You can do all the behind the scenes work to make sure all of the buttons work. Everything's working fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Upload your first episode. Don't say anything. Upload your second episode. Don't say anything. Just be quiet and let it just happen. You don't have to record like 10 in a row and then upload them all at once. Just slowly drip them out one at a time. Keep quiet. Don't say a word. And then when you're ready, then have a launch, because everything works. You know that all your episodes are showing in Apple. All your episodes are showing in Spotify. Your website's ready. Your social media is ready. Everything's done. And everything's working. Just like the little shop downtown. Everything's working. You know the buttons are working. Everybody knows their job. And when you're ready to launch, now you bring the people in, because we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And if we don't know what we're doing, it's going to be a colossal mess, because Apple's not picking up our podcast for some reason.
Yeah.
Spotify's having a hard time with our content. I don't know. Something's happening.
Yeah.
And you have to figure it all out while all these eyeballs and ears are coming to your show for the first time.
And I think having people come to the first one and go, oh, there's already a couple episodes.
Perfect.
I want to listen to all of them. Like, I think that would definitely be beneficial. Okay. No, that gives me a whole different perspective on just how to roll through this starting point. And it's hard too, because you come on to talk about it and say like, yeah, at the table, we're filming this podcast. Here's what we're doing, but you can't go listen to it yet because we're not launching it for a while. So being able to at least say, yeah, there's an episode, go check it out, where it's a soft open. But we're working on a few more, and then also maybe get some feedback and see like, oh yeah, we love this, or we would have liked to hear more about this. That gives us a little bit of an opportunity to redo things, and or maybe there wasn't enough depth in the story that my wife and I sat down and told, and people want to hear more about one piece of it, so we can go back and creates another opportunity for another episode and things like that. So no, I think that's definitely an approach. I got to talk to the team and see how everybody feels. But I think that would be a really, really cool way of just kind of slowly getting it out there and sharing. Because I think there is a small group that I would love to be able to say, hey, go take a look at this. We would love to have you on the show. We've already had conversations with multiple of our friends that we know their stories a little bit, but I think their stories are immensely valuable and would be great. But it's like that, warming them up to the idea of, I want to get on a podcast and tell my story. And I think being able for them to sit and hear ours in that setting would be a little bit easier for them to say, oh yeah, we can do this.
Think about too, who you're going to ask to give you some feedback on your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a family member that's going to be like, oh, Brian, look at you with your little microphone. Aren't you cute? You're like, wait, okay, I didn't listen to it, but I'm just so proud of you that you're out there. I need some comment on what you're hearing. Thank you for your support. But I would try to pinpoint somebody who has no sweet clue what a podcast is. They don't even know what it is. They have no idea what's going to happen, because they have no bias to what they think the Joe Rogan is compared to you. You don't have that comparison, because they don't even know what a podcast is.
Yeah.
So does this serve you? Does the content serve you? Are you connecting with what we're talking about? Would this be something you listen to? And you're bringing somebody new to podcasting.
For sure.
We need more listeners, by the way.
Yeah.
So you want that kind of feedback that's completely unbiased, and then go after a podcast listener who listens to shows all the time, because they have an idea what good sounds like to them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It could be audio quality, it could be content, it could be length of podcast, it could be anything, right? So you have two different perspectives: an avid listener and a complete novice who has no idea what's going on. Because then that gives you a little bit more feedback for you as you build your show. So you want to reach everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, maybe I got my hand up. Ask another podcaster as well, because they're doing it, and maybe they're going to see something. Go back to the football analogy. There's people in the stands who have an opinion of how you play. There's people on the field who have an opinion of how you play. And then there's people on your team who have an opinion of how you play. So as a fellow team member podcaster here with you, I might have some insight that someone in the stands doesn't have.
Yeah.
They don't know what it's like to be on the field.
For sure.
So pull in from a variety of sources. Don't just go after grandma who doesn't even know what a podcast is and thinks you're cute. Like, pull in as much information as you can. It'll help you in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. So the soft opening, I think, is a great way to you don't have to worry about perfection as much with that, right? In a soft opening in a little cafe, they don't care about being perfect. They just want to keep the doors open.
Yeah.
Versus all we want to do is just figure out how to do this. And what I think community members listening to your show, what they love is they're here with you from the beginning. They're like, I remember Brian's podcast at the beginning. It was terrible because he was learning everything.
Yeah.
He didn't know what he was doing. But now I've been with him from the beginning, right? My sister-in-law went to high school here in Canada, and one of her classmates stood up in class one day and said, I don't need to know any of this stuff. I'm going to be a famous movie actor. And everyone in class laughed. And that person is Jim Carrey. So, right. So he actually did that in like grade 11 math. So my sister-in-law can say, I knew Jim Carrey before he was Jim Carrey.
Absolutely.
He sat beside me in math class and he was a complete clown, never paid attention, and he was just a distraction. Quite annoying, right? But
that's fairly on brand.
Right. But for you, your audience can say, I remember when Brian's podcast was new and he was learning how to do this, but he brought me along the journey as a listener. And I'm a community member and I have a passion for his topic. And I knew him when is a great way to build community.
Yeah.
So if we wait to be perfect, we're kind of robbing our audience of the journey of doing what we're doing and building that house.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's honestly, that's a lot of the motivation behind At the Table is we don't want it to just be like, come listen to these stories. I want it to be a connection point where if you're going through something that one of these families is sitting down and talking about, we can be somebody that you can reach out to and say, hey, I'm going through this right now. And I just need somebody to talk to. And honestly, like, a lot of it came out of the idea of the nonprofit that we started of helping families and working with families to build community and to kind of mentor and walk through the process of building their village because of the village and the community that we have. And not being from, we live in the Houston area now. We're not from there. We're from Oregon originally. And to be able to go down and build a community that it is amazing. And the people that we have in our life are amazing to the point where our family has come and said, you can't come home because the community that you have here is too good. And so to be able to kind of walk people through that process. So to have the podcast as a tool that we can point to for those families and say, hey, we've interviewed this family, go listen to this episode and we can actually connect you with them. They've been through what you've been through. So it's not just a listen, it's a building of community. And that's what I want it to be, a catalyst for being able to actually build community, whether it's through the internet or actually face-to-face in person and however that works. But I do want it to be a catalyst for building community in the long run.
How are you guys planning out your content? How far in advance are you planning? Do you have a calendar of what you're going to do? And one other question is it going to be all interview based or how are you going to do your show?
So right now it's interview based and we are working on a calendar as far as recording goes. We want to get to the point where we're putting out at least a show every couple weeks. I think that's we're probably a ways away from that, which is fine. But like I said, we're all kind of full time in something else. So we want to get to a point where we can move into this a little bit more frequently. But like I said, we're still, as far as how we're rolling it out. I think we're still trying to kind of figure it out. The setting of the show, like I said, is us kind of sitting at the table. Jackson, our producer, he's there involved as well, and he's working the cameras and making sure everything's good that way. But he's also very much involved in the process, and he'll chime in from time to time and ask questions. And so he's involved in the interview kind of in a raw, like I was telling you before. There's moments where we're in the middle of telling a story and the kids kind of pop up and they need something. And that's just part of the whole, we want it to be about family, and family sometimes is like that, right? Like it's not always going to be this cleaned up production. There's going to be moments where things get a little bit messy and a little bit hairy. But we wanted that realness to be involved in it, because we want people to feel like, yeah, this is a real setting, and there is aspects of this that are very much like what it would be like to sit at a home with two toddlers, and just have a conversation. As far as what I'm thinking for the future, I do want to keep it as a more intimate, small interview type, but I think that would be fun to do some episodes where we pick a topic like parenting and we have a larger group, and maybe have more of like a panel type thing where we discuss parenting and things like that, and do some kind of spin-off episodes in those types of settings, where it's a little bit different than our typical episode, but it is still on theme with the family and with the idea of just sitting at the table and sharing your story.
Okay. So every second week, that's a great starting point for sure. That's works around your calendar.
Yeah.
The one thing I would suggest to you is when you do an interview-based podcast, it's really more about the guest than you as a host. You're going to be able to interject. You're going to be able to add some color to it, but you're kind of again, football again. You're the ones up in the broadcast studio talking about what's happening on the field. You're not on the field. You're kind of right. You're not part of the game. You're just talking about the game. And your guest is in the game. So anytime that you could get on the field and be the spotlight as a couple together without a guest brings the community back to you. So people aren't coming now for the guest, they're coming for you.
Okay.
And that's going to help kind of direct the content a little bit. So a suggestion for you, weekly podcasts seem to be the norm for people who have the availability to do so. Just get a suggestion maybe. If you and I were having the interview today and I was a guest on your show, and this would be released, and then it'd be 2 weeks from now would be another episode. In that in-between week, some thought for you, maybe the two of you and your wife get together and do like a 5-minute episode where you just recap and talk about what happened last week and the guests you had. And you just talk about it, and there's no prep, just the fact that you listen to it, or you remember, you jot some notes, and just say, last week we talked to Dave on the show. I really liked when he said this. What did you think? Yeah, when he said this was really cool. I really enjoyed it. It's great. If you ever want to be a guest on the show, here's the link. Have a great week. Catch you next week when we have so-and-so coming on. You're done. That's like 2 to 5 minutes. And it just, what it does is it puts one more episode into the feed of your listeners, which then becomes like a routine where people start getting used to it. And it's a very easy lift for the two of you, because you can record this very simply, no big fancy everything, no guest to work around your calendar. The two of you just do a review. And the beauty of it is you can record that just after the interview. When your guest says goodbye and they hit stop, the two of you stay on for like 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Record that little summary, because it just happened. You just did it. Just record your thoughts as a new episode. And now you've just have 2 episodes instead of 1. And it's just a reflection. And what it does for your audience is, if I come to your podcast for the first time and it's a recap issue or episode, you're talking about what happened last week. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back and I'm going to listen to what you just talked about.
For sure.
Because I'm here for the first time and I have no idea what's going on. But I just clicked on your podcast. I see it's a 5-minute episode and I'm like, this is easy. I'll check this out. I come and I listen to you talk about last week. I'm going right back to last week. So it's something simple for the two of you to have a weekly podcast, if that's ever in the plans.
Yeah.
Just do a recap. It's just the two of you talking, because now I get to hear what you think.
Yeah.
Because the whole time you're interviewing somebody, I'm hearing what your guest thinks.
Yeah.
But now I
And
get to hear your thoughts.
another thought I had with that, and I mean, just to throw it out there and see what you think, is having those weekly recaps, and then the potential of also doing a few minutes of just like how our week has gone. The whole thing is about family. It's all about raising kids and being married and all the things in our story. Well, our story is ongoing.
Yeah.
So just having like if there's things that happen throughout the week that we want to share, being able to sit down and just press record in 5-10 minutes of, hey, this is what's going on in our week. We're really looking forward, like you said, looking forward to our guests coming on. Or this came up and it reminded us of a conversation that we had with somebody a couple episodes ago. And we just felt like we wanted to go back and kind of look at it again. And that's not something that I ever thought of, but just as you were saying that, I was like, okay, there's no reason why we can't create mini episodes and have like small bits of just things that go on. That's a continuation of our story.
Those little episodes you do are highly shareable on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube,
for sure.
Which you're talking about an episode. So instead of doing an audiogram, which is just an image with a squiggly line on the screen, it's the two of you talking to the camera and saying, last week we had Dave on, we talked about podcasting. It was a great conversation. You should probably go back and listen to that episode. One of the key things that we talked about was blah, 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 blah. And now as on TikTok or Instagram or wherever you put it, now you have a link to take me back to that episode. I'm going to go listen to the episode.
For sure.
It takes just minutes to record that. You don't have to do some fancy stuff in the background. Just click record.
I got a good enough phone that I can record.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
That's right. So what it does is it just creates more community, more opportunities.
Yeah.
And when you have a guest on, you're not going to be talking about, a bunch of other stuff. You want to focus on the guest. They're sitting here looking at you and you're doing a 5-minute intro. Your guest is like, I got stuff to do, man. I got things to happen here. You want to get to the guest as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
So all of that family update, all of that amazing content, I would reward your audience by putting that at the end of your show.
Okay.
And that's kind of because then you're going to make your listeners listen to the end of your show because they want to get the update on what's going on with your family.
Okay.
As a community member, I care about you and I want to know more.
Yeah.
So when I press play on your episode, you're getting right to your guest. Because what you want to do is you want to convince your listener to put their phone in their pocket and listen to the episode. So if they're sitting there with their phone listening to you do your intro and they're like, yeah, about the thing, and click the link. I know, I'll go to my website, blah, blah, blah. Do I even care about this episode? I'm waiting. Screw it. I'm going to go to the next episode. Right? Yeah. They didn't even listen. So if you jump in right away and get right to your guest, I'm going to take my phone and I'm going to set it down and I'm going to listen to the episode. You got me now.
One of the things that we talked about with our producer, with Jackson, was when we record, and this is something that I pulled from a couple of the podcasts that I like listening to, is pulling like a 30-second or a 15-second snippet of the high point of their story. That's like, oh, I want to know the buildup and I want to know that's the climax, but I want to know how they got to that point. And having that as part of like our just quick hitter introduction. And we always want to keep our introduction to like 45 seconds. Hey, we've got so-and-so on the podcast this week. We're super excited to talk to them. Here's a little bit of their story or whatever. Or even have their voice be the first thing they hear.
Yes.
And come into this high point of the story. And then Chandra and I come in and say, hey, this is so-and-so, this is their story. And then, all right, now welcome to the table. And then
welcome to the table.
Whatever.
Yes. Welcome.
And then it rolls into the full episode.
Love it.
So that was actually something that him and I talked about, because it was, we had a meeting one day and we're like, okay, how do we want this to look? What do we want the flow of this to be? Him and I are both avid podcast listeners. And he was like, and we both kind of said, this is the structure that we really enjoy listening to. And it's also when you get down and you do the research, storytelling, the best storytelling, there has to be a hook. You have to pull them in with something at the beginning that gives them that sense of, I want to know how they got there.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to give a little bit of the climax of the story away to get them to say, oh, I want to know how they got to that point.
Yeah.
So that was something that we talked about right away, is like when we just building out the framework of the show, how do we start an episode? How do we kind of flow through it? I'm fortunate that my brother-in-law is a recording artist, and um, he has some
What?
solid music and stuff
Nice.
that I can utilize as far as just having transition and just music to intro to and things like that. So him and I are working on figuring out what we want to pull and use acoustics of, and also I'd love to be able to promote his stuff. So
Great.
uh, yeah, so he's like, yeah, just let me know what you need, and we'll make it happen. So that's something that also for me was like, I don't want it to just be this empty, weird space and
Yeah.
transitions. I think that when shows have a little bit of that, even if it's just a little thing as you move from one thing to another, if there's a cut scene or whatever, then it's helpful to have that music.
Yeah.
And it just makes things sound a little bit more polished.
Yeah. Imagine clicking play on a podcast and you hear the guest voice say, I was driving down the highway next to the cliff close to the ocean, and the next minute I woke up in the hospital. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
what? And then you jump into the podcast. You're like,
Yeah.
I have to listen. I have no idea what's going to happen here. I want to
Yeah.
know the story. Right. So what I usually do when I do that is I pull a clip from near the end of the podcast because I
Mm-hmm.
heard it at the very beginning. And now I'm
You're
waiting I'm waiting for it to show up in the content
for
as we're
sure.
going through. And then I pull it from the last 30 minutes, 45 minutes of the episode. My listeners are like, come on, where is the story that you talked about at the very beginning? And there
Mm-hmm.
it is near the end, which then draws my listener through the entire content.
All the way through.
And another little tip is when you have a guest on, instead of doing their call to action, their website, everything else at the very, very, very end, that's usually a signal to your listeners that you're done and people will stop listening. So to honor your guest, say something along this lines. Brian, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I have one more question for you, but before I ask that question, I've been saving this question for the end because I really want to know your answer to this. Where do we find your website? Where's your social media? La 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 la. So my
Yeah.
listeners go, dang it. Oh, because I would normally stop listening now because Brian's going to tell me his website. But now I have to listen to all your website stuff and your Instagram handles. And then Dave's going to ask the last question.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I usually pull my quote for the very beginning of my podcast
Okay.
is in that very last section. So like a question like, Brian, thanks for being on the show. My last question to you is, Brian, what do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room? Because now you're going to talk, now that's like completely off topic of everything we talked about.
Yeah.
You as a person, who are you? And then I pull that clip of you talking about, I just want people to know that I care about people and that I want to leave a legacy. I want that at my intro at the very beginning that
Sure.
makes you put your phone away because people haven't heard that all the way through.
Yeah.
Right. And then I usually yank it from the very, very end like that. So
Well,
that's how I get people to listen.
One of the things that we ask like right at the end is, or that I have, because I kind of have like an outline or something like, and it's something that my wife and I have in front of us just to kind of help us out throughout we want them to tell their story, but we definitely want to have points where it's like, okay, we want to kind of reel things back in or guide them through the right direction. We want to have some questions readily available that we know and we can push things along with, and we can stay where we want to stay. So one of the things we asked toward the end, I'll probably misquote it a little bit, but
yeah,
it's along the lines of like, what's one thing that you would tell young couples, young parents, whatever it is, whatever the kind of the high point of their story was that you would tell them before this happens to you, or that you would tell them like early on or something like that. But so that you're getting this like, of anything else, I want to leave you with this. If anything else in my story, this is what I want to leave you with, right? Like this is the thing that this whole process has taught me, is like this little nugget is what I want to leave you with.
right.
So I think that has the potential to definitely do that and be the question that we can utilize kind of like you said at the end. And no, I love it. This has been really informative, and just I always get really excited when I get the opportunity to talk about the things that we're doing and that we're passionate about. Our life has completely changed trajectory in less than a year. I write as well, and I'm actually in the process of writing a book via a blog. And it's just kind of my story and my journey through getting to do all of that, and
Yeah.
that whole experience, as well as being a dad and a husband, and the story and the growth of my faith and things like that. And so, um, one of the things that I sat down to write, because my birthday was a few weeks ago, and I always try to sit and reflect for a little bit. And I just turned 33, and I was like, okay, well, what's happened between 32 and 33? And I started to think back, and I was like, oh my gosh, this year has been crazy, like absolutely, absolutely insane. And so I started writing, and I haven't finished it yet, because I need to get through it so that I can post it. But I was like, I had to go back to my phone and kind of look through photos of what happened in the month of November and in December, January, February. And I'm like 4 pages of typed out stuff, and I'm in January. I'm like, I'm gonna have to cut this into like 4 blog posts, like do quarters of the year, because there's just been so much in this year. And a year ago, I told my wife this the other day, if you'd have told me a year ago that I wasn't going to be teaching in a year, that I would be full-time working and doing and building our nonprofit. We didn't even know we were going to be building a nonprofit a year ago. Like,
Yeah.
if you'd have told me that in a year, this is where you'll be, I would have just been like, you're nuts. There's absolutely no way that in a year we can do that.
Right.
And then to also throw in the things that happened in that year, with kids getting hospitalized and just all the craziness that our life has had. But to still also be moving in that direction. And it's really wild, but
Amazing.
I wouldn't have it any other way. Like I said earlier, it's opened the capacity for when we had our daycare situation recently. I was able to kind of step away and focus on being a dad, and take a little bit of a break from the everyday, and get to do that. And then now I'm back into the swing of running that, building a podcast, writing a book. It's madness, but it's a lot of fun.
Amazing. So I would love to have you on my Living the Next Chapter podcast, the
Okay.
author podcast that I talked about earlier. I love having authors on, even if the book's not ready yet. The journey of creating a book as well is
Yeah.
really important and really exciting, interesting. So if you're ever interested in that, livingthenextchapter.com, that's my website for that one. And then I'm going to have you on Dad Space, which we're going to be recording right after this, which is insane, but I love this. So again, can you, before I have, again, I'm going to do it for you right now. You ready? Here we go. You ready?
Here we go.
Before I ask you my last question, Brian, can you talk a little bit more about the charity, how we can support you in the charity, and more about the website, about your podcast and all of that? And then I have one more question for you.
Okay. So the nonprofit that we started this last year is called We Love HTX, and it is a nonprofit that is designed to empower families and strengthen communities. We are partnering with some people right now that are giving us the capacity to help people through joblessness and into long-term employment, as well as working with some different programs that work specifically with formerly incarcerated and currently incarcerated men, to help integrate them back into society. And my job and my role, and really my vision for We Love HTX, is to come alongside people and to help the family unit through those types of situations, whether it's incarceration, joblessness, just a big family blow up, whatever that looks like, and become a resource and a mentor, coach, whatever you want to call it, to walk them through that process, to keep the family unit together, and to give them the resources that they need to be successful, whether it's looking at long-term employment, or we're working on trying to partner with some family counselors and things like that, to be able to offer those types of services. But we really, at the end of the day, like I was saying earlier, we have an amazing village. We have an amazing community around us that has supported us through a lot of stuff. And I'm a firm believer in it takes a village, not just to raise a kid, but to live. And so I want to walk with people through the toughest times and help them build their community and help them build villages so that they can then turn around and be that village for other people. And just kind of model what that looks like. So www.welovehtx.com. And there's kind of some ideas of how you can give and support there. There's a video there of my story and how I went from being a full-time teacher just a year ago to jumping into this thing 100% full-time, and what that all looks like. And then, the podcast is At the Table, and it's my wife and I, like I said, sitting down and giving the space to families and couples and individuals, really just to share their story and allow them to have a place to say, this is what I've been through. And there's probably other people out there that have been through it too. And we want to create a community where that becomes a space that people can come to and say, like, I need the support of this community, or I need to connect to this community because I'm going through something that I just heard from one of your guests or from your story, and I don't have anybody else in my life that I can talk to about this. And ultimately, that's the life that we are trying to move into. I look at it as my ministry. It's not a faith-based organization. We want to help anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
But my motivation behind it is I feel called to help people and work in that space. And this is how I live out the kingdom and what I'm called to do in the kingdom. So it's absolutely been amazing. And I've been blown away by the support that we've gained in the last year, and the people that have just said, yes, whatever you need, let's do it. And the organizations that have been willing to partner and meet us in a space of how do we grow and go from, like I said, in January incorporating, and in August getting our 501c3 status with the IRS, and then now getting to a point where a lot of the administrative work is done, and we're getting into the work of serving people and building our community. So it's been a super cool adventure, and I'm super excited about continuing it.
Okay, so my last question. Here we go. Then we're doing it an actual example of this together. How's that for reality? So along the lines of consistent improvement and continuous improvement, speaking to that guest I mentioned earlier that played for the CFL, he talked a lot about watching game tape, and that he would watch not just about himself, but also to learn what the other team was doing.
Yeah.
They would watch they would over and over, watch plays over and over, and they would learn, and they'd make notes, and they would review everything.
Yep.
And I don't think a lot of people understand how much time is invested in improving as a player and as a team.
I know.
Let's take that back to podcasting.
Okay.
This whole idea that we need to get better as we go. Do you and your wife have any plans or any thought around reviewing game tape of your podcast, and also reviewing game tape of your favorite podcast, so that you can learn and how you can grow, and your next episode is going to be better on the field than the last episode? Do you have any thoughts around watching game tape around your show?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've already kind of started that process, and maybe it is the athlete in me that is always reflective and looking to grow. And even her, she's even had those moments of, hey, I want to make sure that we're doing this the right way, or I want to make sure that we're growing in this. And since having the idea and really launching the idea of starting a podcast, I have definitely taken a different approach to listening to podcasts. So when I listen for kind of the rhythm of the podcast, and how are they setting that up? How are they transitioning? And I do take it as an approach of like watching film, in the sense of, I want to know, what is it that sounds good to me? What is it that sounds good to other people? What are the things that people are looking for when they're listening to a podcast? How long is too long? How short is too short? What are some of those things that for me make me stick around and listen to a whole episode? And then also asking some of my friends that I know are podcast listeners, and what are some things that you've enjoyed about, what are some podcasts that you enjoy? And then always trying to find new ones so that I have a variety of examples, because
Good.
you can fall into like, I have 2 or 3 podcasts that are my favorite podcasts, and I do like the way that they have a rhythm with theirs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that rhythm is going to work for us.
Yeah.
So because it's a completely different type of podcast or setting or theme, so you have to figure out, okay, well, that piece of that rhythm might work for us, but we also need to do this. And like I said before, not just getting my own perspective of what I think we need to do, but also having the perspective of others that are involved and creating a team atmosphere in that, because I'm going to see one thing when I watch film and somebody else is going to see something a little bit different.
Right.
So having the perspective of everybody involved. And then I think I am just I'm a reflective person in general. Like I said, I sit down every year and look at, whether it's around my birthday, and say, okay, what did this year look like? How did we grow? How did I get better as a person? Things like that. And then also like just at the end of the year and at different seasons throughout the year, like how can I do a better job? Um, I mean, whether it's being a husband, being a dad, being an entrepreneur, a nonprofit founder, looking at each week, what did I miss? What can I do better next week? How can I grow? How can I move forward? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've met with people and I get in the car after we have a great conversation for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And all of a sudden I get in the car and I'm like replaying the conversation in my mind, thinking, okay, how could I have maybe said this better or done that? That's just the way my mind works.
Yeah.
So when I first started getting into this idea, I think it was automatically kind of part of it was, first, I need to do the research behind how we make this good from the jump, which you never know how good it's going to be until you really take the jump.
Right.
Excuse me. But then also keeping in mind as we go, like being reflective and making sure that each step of the way, like you said, it doesn't have to be, oh, we have to wait till next season to make these changes, or we have to wait till we've filmed so many episodes to make these changes. We can make changes and we can get better from one episode to the next.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And we sat down after we filmed the first episode and we were like, once the cameras were off, the 3 of us sat there and like, okay, how can we do this? What worked well? What didn't? What could we do better next time? And just kind of reviewed on, okay, these are the things we really liked. These are the things that we maybe could have done a better job of. And just continuing that conversation.
Okay, Brian. So a little bit of homework for you.
Yep.
I would love to get a commercial for your podcast.
Okay.
So think of your radio station in between songs. Just commercials pop up for Joe's Plumbing. Find Joe here. Blah blah.
Yeah.
I need something like that for your podcast.
Okay.
That I can insert into my podcast.
Okay.
Because I want listeners of my show to come to you and come and listen to your show. So create that for me. Anytime you have that, just email it to me, and I'm going to start inserting it into my 7 different podcasts and expose you to my audiences. So that's a great way to promote your show. When you have your website set up and everything like that, have that as something that I can download off your website.
Yeah.
That's a great way to get that information, and I can share. I can be part of your team to share that as well. Come back when the podcast is ready and everything's flowing and you guys have some time, and let's do a recap.
Yeah.
And kind of see where you're at, and maybe we can have another follow-up conversation as well around your podcast.
Sure. That would be awesome.
Awesome.
I did have a question that I thought of now, and of course, right as we're finishing.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm going to blank on it a little bit, but it'll come to me. Oh my gosh.
This is why we have editing.
Yes.
No one will even know this is happening, by the way.
Yeah, no. Literally, as you were saying that, I had a question, and now I just cannot even. It's completely gone.
I love it.
Commercial. I'm trying to replay through my mind. Oh, yes. So right now, because I'm working, I have so many things I'm working on with the book and with my blog. I have a website that's like my own personal website.
Yep.
Where all of the stuff is. You can find there's links to my nonprofit in there. There's links to my blog. My blog is on that website. My goal and what I was thinking was I was going to just make a page from my own website would be the podcast website for now. I also could go the route of just getting its own website. So I built all of it myself. So it's one of those things where I can do that. That's not something that's difficult for me to do.
Good.
And I have a buddy that's what he does. So he kind of goes over my work and just makes sure that everything looks good and cleans things up for me.
Good.
But in your experience, is it best to completely separate those things and pull them apart? Or is that something that I should kind of leave tied in there? What is that? Does it matter that much to begin with?
So think of your listener in response to this. So if I have davecampbell.com, which I don't own, by the way, don't go there. I have no idea what that is. But Dave Campbell, that's my name. davecampbell.com/howtopodcast/ and I'm trying to say that's really kind of hard to verbalize on my podcast. Yeah. So I bought the domain How to Podcast. Like, how is that even available? How to Podcast is a domain that was available. I bought it. So now when I talk, I'm like, go to howtopodcast.ca. I'm in Canada. Howtopodcast.ca. Everything's there. So now I don't have to give you my Instagram, my LinkedIn, my Facebook, my TikTok. I don't have to waste time. Because everything's there. So I own that piece of the internet, and it's part of my regular thing. So everybody knows me as the guy from howtopodcast.ca. So I own that piece. And so if you add a tab to your regular site, it's going to be your site / something. Yeah. So what is easy to say? What's easy to remember? You own that. So I would look at the domains that are available around your content and make it as general or as whatever you want. You could have aroundthetable.com, atthetable.com.
Yeah.
But think about what it sounds like.
Okay.
Look at how it's spelled, because certain words spelled together as one long sentence, there's certain words that pop out that you don't want, or those words don't match, like the word it and sh at the last part of a word. You don't want those together because you're like, wait a minute, that's not what I wanted to say. So just look at it, make sure it sounds good, and then buy the domain. Domains can be like $12 a year.
Yeah.
And even if you don't use it, let it go after a year, but you bought it. And then you can redirect that domain to whatever you want, even if you don't have a website. You can redirect that to your Facebook group. You can redirect it to your nonprofit while people are, and then you can say the name of your website, even though it's pointing somewhere else. Yeah. And then because future-wise, you want to be able to have reference points back into your past episodes where you're not saying to your listeners, go here, and then 10 episodes later, oh, no, go here now. Oh, no, we changed. Now go over here. Because if I listen to episode 1, I'm trying to find your website and it doesn't exist. So you want to kind of have it planned out in the early stage of your podcast. What's your call to action? Where are we sending people all the time? And make it as simple as possible to say. So don't have like a 35 character long website address.
Absolutely.
Blah, 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 .com. That's way too long. I'm not going to remember that on the bike at the gym. But how to podcast, like how to podcast. Like,
that's simple.
Come on, that's so simple, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I would say.
I'll definitely have to look into and start to play with and see what the options are as far as that goes.
Yeah. So I use GoDaddy to find my
that's
domains.
what I've used for both mine.
Just go in the search, type it in. You don't have to have a .com. It's popular, but those are running out. So you can go with a .co or a .education or a .media, whatever. Mm-hmm. Whatever sounds good to you. That's that you have to say it all the time. Yeah. So, pick something that you like to say.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that helpful?
Yeah. That's definitely helpful.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. And then let me know when you got that settled, because I'll put that in the show notes. Yeah. The people who are listening to this episode way in the past, they're going to have the up-to-date information. So just remember that. Yeah. All your show notes, descriptions, all your links, that if you ever do make a change, just go back and update what's in the past so that your past listeners who fall in love with you will find your content and follow you all the way through.
Okay. That's helpful.
Good stuff. So everyone listening, there you go. You got some great tips from Brian today. I love the story. Review your game tape, get on the field, get out of the stands, get on the field because that's how you're going to podcast. And remember, you're never a bungee jumper until you jump. Just remember that. You can talk all about bungee jumping. You can have books about bungee jumping. You can be an expert in bungee jumping. But until you jump off that ledge, you're not a bungee jumper. So you're not a podcaster until you podcast. So even if it's not perfect, get out there, take the leap. You're going to fall into a community that loves you. They want to support you. They want to be there for you. Take the jump. You're safe. We're here to catch you. Check out Brian's podcast. Support his amazing charity. And this is why we do this. So, Brian, thank you so much for being part of the How to Podcast series.
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's been awesome.
Okay, now imagine a world where you could get together with other podcasters. Wouldn't that be nice? Like, to actually interact with a podcaster, maybe meet somebody that could come on your show as a guest. Maybe, oh, wait a minute, maybe you would be a great guest for someone's show. But Dave, how do I do that? How do I meet up with someone? I really wish there was a way that I could meet up with other podcasters. If only somebody would create a meetup group for podcasters. And oh, but Dave, I can't afford to join a meetup group. I don't really have money for that because I'm spending all my money on my podcast. But I really, really need to meet up with other podcasters. Dave, tell me, do you have a solution for me? Do you? Do you, Dave? I do. We have our own How to Podcast family meetups on meetup.com, and I have to pay for it, but I do it so that you don't have to, and you can join us for special guests, great topics, great conversation, and it's totally free for you. It costs me money. It doesn't cost you anything. All the information's on our podcast website, howtopodcast.ca. Head over there, click the link, and go join the group. Stop worrying about meeting other podcast. You can meet us. I would love to meet you. It's available to everyone, and I'd love for you to be there. Meetup.com, and the links are at howtopodcast.ca. I'll meet up with you there. Join our meetups. See you.